Well, welcome back in this third day of the Integral European Conference 2020 online. Great to see you all. We're starting to get into the flow, aren't we, of this gathering, and starting to really feel like a real thing, like a real space, a field that is being populated. So welcome again. We come at this moment in one of our common gatherings in our main hall. And today we are going to enjoy a number of beautiful keynotes and panel discussion. We will be joined this afternoon by Vivian Dittmar, as well as Terry Patton, and finally Hansi Freinacht for this series of 3 keynotes. There will also be a panel discussion a little bit later also with Terry, facilitated by Terry, within amongst people, Hansi Freinacht. So quite a beautiful program. And maybe to have us kick off this afternoon, I would love to welcome wholeheartedly Vivian Dittmar. I'm always happy to welcome powerful women, Vivian. You are an author, an emotional intelligence expert, also a researcher of consciousness. And you founded the Be the Change Foundation for Cultural Change. You're also the author of the book, The Power of Feelings, a practical guide to emotional intelligence. And in your work, what really interests us today is some of the distinctions that you have introduced and clarified around feelings and around the explanation about why they matter. And so you're able to help us, I believe, navigate the moment that we're in today, because you will offer us, I know, a number of concepts, paradigms, and pointers around addressing challenges feeling, and how we can all evolve with these feelings and support them to evolve from destructive forces into life-affirming powers. So it sounds really juicy. I'm excited to hear your keynote now about the evolution of feelings. Over to you, Vivian.
Thank you, Maud. I'm very, very excited to be speaking at the IEC, particularly on the subject of the evolution of feelings. I've written 4 books about feelings, so I'll not manage to convey everything that I've found out. So I'll really focus on the evolutionary aspect, which I feel is really, really relevant to this point in time. So let me start with kind of a distinction between 5 types of sensations that I've found really, really useful. When I first started to go into the subject of feelings, it was really out of a personal need to learn more about what feelings are, what they're good for, how to handle them. I'm a very emotional person and a very sensitive person, and nothing I really found about feelings in psychology and spirituality, in science at the time, really helped me on a practical level to get what feelings are about. So it very much started as a very, very personal research. And then with time, I realized this is valuable for other people. And I wrote my first book about it 12 years ago, The Power of Feelings. So I started with making a distinction between 5 types of sensations, because I noticed that when we say feelings, it's really, really vague. We often say feelings for, just about anything. It can be an intuition, can be a physical sensation, can be an emotion, can be love, which can be a state of consciousness. So what are we actually talking about when we say feelings? And I'm just gonna show you a slide. Actually, no, it's not sharing. Okay, it disappeared.
If you can broaden your window a little bit, that you might see the sharing button, which is in the middle.
Yeah, I have it.
Yes, and then
but it's not showing me the file I want to share. We tested it before. Okay, so I guess we don't need the slide. So let's do it without. So the 5 types of sensations, the first type of sensation, and that was the first to appear in living organisms, is physical sensations. So this is what we all know: touch and sensation of heat or cold, pleasure and pain. And of course, there already on a very fundamental level, we have a kind of a like and dislike. and we will instinctively withdraw from pain or from anything that's too hot or too cold, and we will seek that which is pleasurable. And then the second type of sensation is already a bit more advanced, and that's what I call biological programs. And these biological programs are instincts, and they are much closer related to our animal nature. So they work with a very simple stimulus response reaction. So there's an immediate reaction to a stimulus without any conscious reflection. So you might see a beautiful woman or a gorgeous man, and you notice just this, wave of energy in your system without even thinking about it. That's a biological program, and it's stronger than our rational mind. And of course, there's many other types of biological programs. There's, for example, disgust, hunger, thirst, lust I already mentioned, but also motherly or fatherly love. There's biological fear, biological anger, so fight and flight. These are all immediate responses that in the brain completely bypass any conscious reflection. So this means when we experience them, which of course we all still do because we still need them, we don't realize what's going on until we're already flooded by these sensations. So the two types of sensations that I've just mentioned now, the physical sensations and the biological programs, they're both attributable to a pre-personal state of consciousness because they're so instinctive. But then something interesting happened. We evolved and started to live in more complex social groups. And this turned out to be a great advantage for us. And we started to realize that, this kind of immediate instinctive reaction is not always the best for our relationships. So we started to develop the ability to consciously create feelings and to work with them. So we now have another type of feeling, and I call them feelings as social powers, which actually goes through the reflection of the conscious mind. So while the first two types of sensations can come up often within a fraction of a second, the feelings as social powers tend to be more reflected, and it can take up to a minute or two for them to fully form. And there we can have I distinguish 5 basic feelings as social powers, which is anger, sadness, fear, joy, and shame. And together, these 5 feelings form our emotional compass, and I will talk about that model a little bit more deeply at a later point in the keynote. But what distinguishes these from the earlier types of, biological fear, biological anger, biological sadness, is that they come through reflection. So I can consciously say, I consider something wrong. I consider it wrong that we are treating the planet in a way that is completely destructive and that destroys the foundation of life for future generations. I can personally position myself and say, this is wrong. And then I can create, if I do that in a mature way, I can create a mature anger power, which generates energy for me to take action in a way that is clear, that is focused, and that is constructive and life-affirming. So this is one example of a life-affirming, mature anger power. Now, of course, many of us will know anger only in its shadow aspect. In its shadow aspect, anger is very destructive. And that's what I also call immature anger. And each of the 5 feelings, anger, sadness, fear, joy, and shame, they each have a powerful light, life-affirming expression, and a shadow expression. So before we go deeper into the emotional compass and the light and shadow expression of the 5 feelings of social powers, because they're very important for us today, let's look at 2 other types of sensations. So I talked about physical sensations, biological programs, which are pre-personal, and now I talked about feelings of social powers. And then there's another type of sensation, which I refer to as emotions. Now, emotions, often the term is used quite broadly. It's not used as specifically as I use it. When I use the term emotion, I'm referring to feelings from the past. So feelings that at some point were generated, yet have not been felt, have not been integrated, and are therefore emotional baggage. So they're part of our emotional backpack. And these emotions have the tendency to be triggered every now and then suddenly we find ourselves in an emotional state that is often very immature, often very destructive, often overwhelming. And we lose contact with our maturity, with our more evolved aspects of consciousness. So dealing with emotional baggage is a key, actually, for the evolution of consciousness. And the way to deal with emotions is to connect with higher states of consciousness. And this is the 5th type of sensation I want to talk about. So we had physical sensations, biological programs, which are pre-personal. We have the feelings of social powers and the emotions, which are personal. So people are identified with them. They feel this is my feelings, this is what I consider wrong, this is what I stand for, or this is what I like in the case of joy. And with emotions, often people are very identified with them and they're like, no, that's not my emotional backpack. This shouldn't be like that. He shouldn't be behaving like this. People shouldn't be destroying the planet. Yeah, this is the kind of stuff that creates shadow feelings and comes with emotions. And then we have the 5th type of sensation, which is the abilities and the states of consciousness. And here we move into the transpersonal realm. Abilities and states of consciousness are, for instance, the ability to love. And here, of course, I'm not talking about the biological program of love. I'm also not talking about the kind of love where we say, oh, I just love roses, yeah, which is kind of a personal like. But we're talking about a non-dualistic love, where we open to an ability to love what is, or to love another human being in their entirety. So with the aspects we personally like, and with the aspects we personally find challenging. And we see that together they form the totality of the person, and we reach a place where we can embrace that. And we see that this is the beauty of the person, the light and the shadow. And we reach a place where we can see that eventually in the whole planet, in the whole universe. We see that the totality of the planet is beauty, which is composed of light and dark. So love is one example of a transpersonal ability or state of consciousness. Now, why do I call it ability or state of consciousness? I notice that currently where we are as a human species, we're all born with the potential to develop the ability to truly love. Yet it's a potential. It doesn't realize itself automatically. Maybe at some point in the future that will happen. But where we are in evolution right now, like it takes a journey for a person to develop the ability to truly love. And often that's a journey of heartbreak. Often that's a journey of crisis. Often that's a spiritual journey. Often that's a journey of maturing and also transcending certain parts of me that make us suffer. So what are some other examples of abilities and states of consciousness? For example, the ability to truly trust. When we're in the personal consciousness, the me consciousness, trust often means, I trust you. It means I trust that you're going to behave the way I want you to behave. And that's actually not trust. That's a form of control, which is fine. Like that the self wants to control, the ego wants to control. And it's just something very different than trust from a transpersonal perspective. And trust from a transpersonal perspective as an ability or state of consciousness is something where, again, it's non-dualistic. And it means even if things are going very differently than I would have liked, than I would personally like, I trust that in the whole, it is exactly as it needs to be. And the more deeply we move into trust, the more deeply we are able to experience that. Yet notice I call it ability and state of consciousness. I call it ability because it needs to be developed. I call it state of consciousness because even if you have developed the ability, it doesn't mean that you are consistently in a state of consciousness of love or of trust. For example, you might be really connected with yourself. Maybe you've been on a retreat. Maybe, you just had a really, really good time and you're centered and you notice you're full of trust and you're full of love. And then something happens and you're emotionally triggered. Something in your emotional backpack gets activated and you find yourself thrown out of this state of consciousness. And suddenly you can kind of remember, there used to be this place of love and of trust and of surrender and of gratitude and of connection. But right now you're not there. And in my experience, it's super important that we learn to be very, very honest about right now I'm not there. And right now I'm emotionally triggered. And right now I'm in the emotional state of consciousness of a 3-year-old. And when we do that, we start to mature. We start to take responsibility for this whole spectrum of sensations that we all experience. So we all still have physical sensations. We all still go for pleasure and we shun pain. We all still have biological programs, of course. And we all have feelings as social powers. Simply because we evolve to other states of consciousness, it doesn't mean that we no longer have anger or fear or sadness or shame or simple dualistic joy, for example, at having a piece of chocolate. We still have them, but it's kind of like the more you open to the broader consciousness, the transpersonal consciousness, the more that consciousness encompasses the other sensations. So now, if you find, you suddenly have this rush of attraction towards this gorgeous man, you can notice that, and then you notice, okay, that's pre-personal, but on a personal level, I don't want to go there. So you don't go there, right? And similarly, from a transpersonal, you can be in a place of trust and you can notice that your personal self doesn't like what's happening. The personal self might, I wish we were in Hungary right now. I want to be with all these cool people. I wish we could all be together and I don't like this and this is wrong and why are they closing the borders? And, I can have this kind of personal grumble about it. And then there's this other space that is like, yeah, and this is what is. And I'm so connected with the bigger transpersonal sense of what is, that I know what is right. And it's not a dualistic right. It's right beyond right and wrong. So let me go back to the emotional compass and the emotional backpack, because this is where most people today are stuck. And I think we're kind of stuck there also because the whole realm of feelings has been taboo. Like I told you, I couldn't really find anything useful about it. Later, the more I researched it, I found out that the subject was really taboo. in scientific research up until very recently, up until neuroscience could actually measure that there is feelings, and they're like, oh, feelings are for real, okay. And then they actually found out that if a person does not have access to their feelings, maybe because of an accident, maybe because of a surgery they had, so for anatomical reasons, they are incapable of making decisions. So they can perform normally or even exceptionally at an IQ test, yet they're completely incapable of performing the simplest of tasks, of just living a normal life, because they cannot make even the simplest decision. So from that direction, also from the evolution of artificial intelligence, science has found that actually our thought processes, our intelligence is inseparable from our feeling processes. So we have a lot of catching up to do because everyone's ignored it, including psychology up until very recently. So what's our catching up that we have to do? Let's go back to the emotional compass. I noticed that I mentioned that in the emotional compass, and you're going to get a beautiful visual of this, okay? Where this will be summarized. But in the emotional compass, we have the five basic feelings: anger, sadness, fear, joy, and shame. And here we have 4 feelings that are directed outwards. So anger is directed outwards. Sadness is also directed towards something else. So I'm sad about something, I grieve something. And fear and joy. And then shame is the first feeling that is directed inwards, where we look at ourselves. So in the compass, shame is actually in the center. Now, these 5 feelings all perform very important functions. Anger, I already mentioned, allows us to be clear, to be active, and in its shadow aspect is actually destructive. So anger is great if we can actually change a situation. Sadness helps us to accept that which we cannot change. So it's kind of the opposite of anger. It calms us down. It relaxes us. In its shadow aspect, it causes us to go into kind of a passive resignation and a disengagement from what's happening. Fear is the feeling that enables us to meet the unknown. And the unknown can be danger, and it can be enormous potential. And of course, right now, in the corona crisis, there's a lot of fear, and that's good. It's a healthy reaction. We don't know what we're facing. We don't know where we're going. Let it be a healthy fear. Let it be a mature fear, and it will help you to meet the unknown in your life, and it will help us collectively to stay open to this field of the unknown that is outstretched before us vastly. I don't remember a time, I don't think there has been a time when we together as humanity have been in such a space of uncertainty, which also means it's rife with potential. And of course, there is danger there. So most people only know the shadow aspect of fear, which is paralysis. And then we have a 4th feeling in the compass, pointing out, which is joy. And that's, of course, everyone's favorite feeling, because joy is the only feeling that we have when things are actually the way we want them to be. And in that, joy is beautiful. It allows us to appreciate when our needs are met. It allows us to appreciate beauty, to celebrate connection, all the good things in life. And yet also fear has a shadow aspect. And the shadow aspect is illusion. And this often happens to people when they go into positive thinking, you know, and they say, we can just think this positive. We can just think this virus away. You know, it doesn't work like that. You can't just, you know, put this layer of everything's great on what is, and it keeps you from confronting the things that might need to be confronted with a mature anger, a mature fear, or a mature sadness. And then there's the 5th feeling in the center, shame, which is related to self-reflection in its mature expression. It allows us to question ourselves, to question our actions, our behavior, to see how appropriate is my behavior, how is it being received. And then, of course, also with shame, many people only know the shadow expression, and the shadow expression is self-abasement. And that's where we judge ourselves harshly. We really can go to a place of feeling like I shouldn't exist in this way. There shouldn't be a human being like this. You know? So it can be a very, very painful and destructive place. So one of our main tasks right now is to keep moving from the shadow aspects of feelings towards the power aspect. And the key for doing that is to let go of what I call our absolutes. Our absolutes are the places in our ego where we feel we know we are absolutely right about something. And this can be, we're absolutely right about Corona being terrible, or we're absolutely right about Corona being a farce. It can be, we're absolutely right about the integral map. It can be anything we're absolutely right about. And this is actually what our ego is composed of, these absolutes. These are the building blocks of our ego. And they cause tremendous suffering, and they cause shadow feelings. So when you find yourself in the shadow aspect of any of these feelings, and then often that comes with a lot of emotion, look for the absolute, and it's often like a clenched fist, and see if you can release it and feel the pain that's trapped in it, and move to a place of, okay, what do I want? What's important for me? In a way that also respects that what is important for each person varies. Okay, so there we can start to relate to each other and say, okay, this is what's important for me. And then Bence can say, okay, this is what's important for me. And Maud can say, this is what's important for me. And then feelings become social powers, and we can play with each other with the full spectrum of our emotional compass without it ever becoming destructive or violent or inauthentic, or all the other things that we do when we go into shadow feelings. So that was a quick rundown of the evolution of feelings. It was a great joy for me to share it with you. You will get the emotional compass as a beautiful visual for you to download, and you will also get a slide that I prepared for you about the evolution of feelings and the evolution of will that accompanies it, from pre-personal, personal to transpersonal. If you want to know more, my book, The Power of Feelings, goes much deeper, and you can find out more on my website, also viviandittmar.com. Thank you very much.